Viewers, and welcome back to the Self-Made Auto channel. So before we get started, I'll answer the question about me eye. I'm like a pirate today. Anyhow, driving down the road in a customer's car in a little test drive, and all of a sudden something's in my eye. I don't know if it fell off my hat. Could be it's getting pretty crusty. Long story short, something landed in my eye on a test drive. Not even working on a car, of all things. I know you guys scream all the time, but long story short, didn't want to go to the hospital and get the Rona, so I toughed it out for a couple days, and that didn't work well for me. Ended up with, I don't know, chunk of something in there. ER, they took it out. Eye doctor took the rest of it out. Some antibiotics. I'm on the up and up. I can't see anything out of this eye, but we're good. So we're going to keep moving. I want to talk to you today about this 2012 Honda Pilot. They've got the big 3.5 in it. And we've done a video, I think, very similar to a problem that this one has, which is, honestly, this is only the second time I've ever run across it. So I think it's kind of rare, but I want to show the importance of not getting on a rabbit trail and sticking to your diagnostic routine. So I'll give you a quick rundown. Thing came in, inspection, money lights on. I drive it in, seems to run fine. Leave it sitting here idling, you hear a few misfires. You know, nothing serious, not a single dead miss. Fire up scan tool, I got a PO 302, 303, 304, and a PO 300. Anytime you see that on your Honda Pilots, like 10 and newer, or I don't know, 8 to 13, somewhere's in there. Anyways, they got a service bulletin on it. You get those codes. The baby needs an engine. Honda extended the warranty, 8 years, unlimited mileage. This being a 12 is out by 2 months. So Honda will not do the overhaul. They overhaul 4 cylinders, cylinders 1, 2, 3, and 4. They put piston rings in it and replace the spark plugs, and that's it. And that's what these things need. You get them in with these codes, this random fish bite misfire, that's it, stop, halt right there, put a motor in it, or rebuild it. But me, I wanted to stick to my routine and just verify that's what it is. So easy enough. Usually you pull the back spark plugs out and they are completely oil fouled, especially cylinders 1 and 3. You take them out, spark plug gaps are, slammed right shut with oil crusties, the oil ash that gets on the spark plugs like the GMs do on their active fuel management engines or displacement on demand, whatever you want to call them. And these are the same thing, but lo and behold, I went right down the same rabbit trail. Pulled the coils out of the back, pulled them out of the front, pulled the plugs out, and they're clean. They're mismatched because somebody's been throwing parts at it, but they're clean. So, needless to say, looking at some scan data, I could see cylinders number 2 and number 3 missing constantly. Take coil, lift it out, put it in, doesn't change. Cylinder 1 seems to be working. However, looking at scan data, I also seen that the rear bank of the engine, so this is bank 1, cylinders 1, 2, and 3 in the back, were running super rich. The fuel trim was like negative 30. Short-term fuel trim was cutting all the fuel right off. And that was true because I looked at the downstream oxygen sensor and it was running around 700 millivolts. So it's not like the air-fuel ratio sensor was lying to the computer and saying, take away this fuel. If it was, the downstream sensor reflected that. So let's say your upstream is faulty and it's reading rich and your fuel trim's correcting. If it wasn't really reading rich, your downstream oxygen sensor would be like at 0, it'd be pegged right, low. So at this point, I went to lunch, thought about it, says, what can make that one bank of the engine run rich, more rich than the other? So, not a lot. Injectors, for one thing, fuel pressure too high on that back bank. If the fuel crossover tube, I don't know how they cross fuel bank to bank, but let's envision that, say the thing was kinked and wasn't getting enough fuel to the front or something. I don't know. So I decided to start with injectors. Let's look at injectors. Let's look at their function. Let's, make sure they work. And that's where I found my problem. So in order to look at all the injectors on the Honda, and you can see the thing's running quite smooth right now, despite how it may sound on camera. These things always sound like a washing machines. But I saw some of this stuff and like, oh baby, the old rodents are in. But at any rate, you can hook onto all your injectors at, I think it's J111 or C111. It's a junction connector here, and it's the first 6 on the left. If you got all the yellow ones facing up, the other ones go to the mass airflow, cam and crank sensor, and ECM power, I believe. And then there's a main power feed from the PGMI relay. So you only want to grab the injector. So I got all the injectors on there, easy enough. Come over here and I saw this. Pop it right up on your screen conveniently. But here is the parade of our injectors, assuming I've got the right wires, and you can instantly see, you know, one of these things does not belong here. So let's pause this. And hence, normal fuel injector will draw about 1 amp, okay, roughly. So we come down here, we measure these up, and they're about, what, 900 milliamps. And we've got this little guy here about 3.3 amps. And it's just your common shorted fuel injector. Now, the dilemma is, my cylinders that are misfiring are cylinders 2 and cylinders 3. And this is only showing 1 shorted injector, oddly enough. So, I've got the old scan tool here, and we can go through and we can shut off each injector. And technically, when we shut these off, we should see one of these disappear on our pattern. So, we're on our waveform here. So let's get a few less on the screen. I guess we can make a trigger. We'll just do a auto, and we'll trigger it off the bad one here, so that stays on our screen paraded nicely. And we'll go through here. I've got to let the engine warm up a little bit before we can shut these off, so let me back out of this. See where we're at. Yeah, it's got to be 185 degrees, so we've got to let it run for a minute. Alright, she's warmed up. Do not press the throttle, it says. Okay, so hopefully we can all see this now. So we're, like I said, we're going to trigger here. So I'm going to shut them off backwards. So we'll shut off injector number 6. And you immediately see this must be injector number 6 because it disappeared. So we'll turn that one back on. And injector number 5. So that's that one there. You saw that one disappear. Injector number 4. Over here. That one disappeared. Injector number 3. Oh, that's that one. It's like playing whack-a-mole. And remember, number 3 was one of our misfiring cylinders. Cylinder number 2, that one there. Uh-oh, what's that leave us with? Numero uno. Uh-oh, you still see it on the screen? Not me. I'm surprised that our trigger's not messing with us here, but let's turn injector number 1 back on. And there it is. So that's pretty quick and dirty. That is our shorted fuel injector. And I'm going to pop into some service data here. I just want to show you guys something. Just because it is kind of interesting that cylinder number 1 is functioning as it should, or at least it appears to be on scan data. So bear with me. So right here on our scan tool, I'm bringing up cylinder contribution. So you can see cylinder number 2 and cylinder number 3, their numbers keep popping negative. You know, they're not contributing as much during the rotation. Perhaps something that's a little easier for you to look at. I think this actually has actual misfire data. And we'll see who's misfiring here. Cylinder total misfire is where we're at here. Let me just get these all on here for you. Get rid of these ones we don't want to see anymore. But we come up to total misfires. Cylinder 2 and cylinder 3 are our biggest contributors. A little bit on number 1. But, you know, data doesn't lie. You know, clearly the number 1 injector is shorted. So we can leave it at that, folks. Hopefully, sometimes I can't portray my thoughts in my mind as well as I would like to. But hopefully this encourages you to, you know, it's a good diagnostic routine to, you know, pull codes, you know, check for service bulletins. Always check for service bulletins. However, don't, you know, take that as the written law. You know, once you get the bulletin, you're like, oh, that fits my criteria exactly. We got a misfire, we got these codes. Here's what it needs. Prove it. You know, at least take and prove it. Don't just, you know, jump to conclusions and say, yep, tell your customer, we're going to pull this engine out. We got to do, you know, we got to re-ring the 4 cylinders and the new spark plugs, because after that $3,000 bill, you're going to be pretty embarrassed when the, you know, $50 fuel injector was really your issue. So, you know, just always make sure you can prove it, you know, just even as I did, you know, it's simple enough, pull the plugs out. You know, if they're not fouled, then, you know, move on. You know, move on and find out what the real cause is. When you notice stuff like, it's running rich on one bank or it's running lean on one bank, step away from it for a minute and ask yourself why. What are the possible causes? Even if you got to write it down, what can make one bank of the engine run rich? And then just, have a little think tank with yourself, or, phone a friend, talk to somebody else in the industry that's on it, get on one of the, groups on Facebook or something where it's all, a bunch of texts and, kind of bounce ideas off each other just in case there's not something you're thinking, and know the operating strategy of the engine. Is it mass airflow? Is it a MAP engine? Is it EGR? Is it variable valve timing? Are there things that you can verify easily? Like this one, it's super easy to verify cam timing. It's got plugs, pop the 2 plugs, line up the crank, and, boom, yep, my cam timing's on. Look at some data. Does my mass airflow look normal? Does my MAP look normal? Is the barrel normal? Is the engine coolant temp normal? All these things that can make it run rich. These engines are kind of a pain in the hoo-ha to check fuel pressure on, so I immediately went for injectors. Just let's have a look. They're easy enough to do. It's non-invasive, and a simple amp clamp. So gives you something to think about. And I guess the other thing we can say, while we're on the subject, is a scope made this job super duper easy. Yes, you could rule out a shorted fuel injector using an ohm meter. You're going to be pulling, let's think, can you do it from, no you can't because you got to get to the other side. You can do it from the ECM. You could probably take the ECM out and go from power source to, it would be a little tricky. You could do it from the ECM. It'd probably be faster just to pull the intake, but at that point, you're not on a guess, but you're looking to eliminate. The scope made it super easy. If you're not using a scope in the shop, you should be. They're cheap enough to buy. We use the Pico, but there's all sorts of scopes out there that you could use. Pico is super nice. But like I say, if you're not using one in the shop, you should be. So make this job 1,000 times easier, quick and easy. We're under our 1 hour. We can prove it. We can call the customer with confidence and say, you need a fuel injector, and specifically the number 1, numero uno. And we can move on. Everybody's happy. And whoever shot all the rest of the parts at it, they're not so happy. But maybe they'll watch this video and then they'll be happy. So, not my normal video, folks. I'll try to put a link to the very first one of these that I diagnosed that was similar. I don't know if it was number 1 or 3 or who it was, but it also had a bad one, and I think it was the same color. Believe it or not, I think it was a gray one. But that's that. Why don't you guys head down to that comment box, leave your question, comment, criticism, concern. Don't forget to leave me a comment about wearing safety glasses during test drives, and while you're down there, subscribe, ring the bell, and push the other buttons that make sure you get notifications. And just remember, viewers, if I can do it, you can do it. Thanks for watching.